There's our smoked and red braised St. Louis pork ribs. Hey guys, welcome back for another cook video. On today's video, what I want to do is take some cuts of meat that we're used to seeing and put a little bit of a spin on it by infusing it with different cultures. A couple months ago, one thing that I was really into is eating a lot of Chinese food. But as I was eating more and more of the food, I was trying to figure out like how could I blend some of this into barbecue, what certain cooking techniques work, what type of dishes lend itself better to this kind of cooking. One of my favorite dishes that I came across, a red braise pork belly. It's a pork belly that's kind of cut into cubes, you know, mixed with a light and dark soy and just kind of like braised a long time. And I felt like, well, that's definitely just pork belly burn end. You know, maybe I'll do that in the future sometime, but I really wanted to do something different. And because I had extra ribs laying around, I want to try doing a red braise pork rib and see, does that same cooking technique work just as well for a rib as it does pork belly? So without getting too much into it, let's start cooking. For this preparation, we are still using the St. Louis ribs that I got from Costco. For the purpose of this dish, I don't want the rib tip and the cartilage to be part of it, so we're gonna remove it. So just like always, we're starting on the back side right here. There's not too much that needs to be removed. Sometimes this fat you can just kind of peel off. And what I'm trying to do when I'm figuring out how I want to remove this cartilage is kind of run my fingers right above where these bones are. Fingers kind of run all the way down to where my bones are getting really thin. So once you guys can do that, just gonna follow that line that you gave yourself. And as you go, you can feel the crunch of the cartilage. I would say that in a traditional sense, this is your St. Louis rib, and then this is your rib tip right here. So I'm not going to do much trimming off of this rib tip. Depending on where I'm cooking this thing, I might split this in half, but we'll deal with the rib tip some other time. All I'm really going to do, again, there's not that much trimming to do. That fat layer that sometimes we have on the corner right there, we don't really have that. I just want to make sure that there's nothing super thin. Like this edge is really thin. So like I did before, I'm going to find that last rib and just kind of cut that off so we can get a meaty rib at the edge. So same rule, I want to get somewhere between 10 to 13 ribs. If we get lucky, it's 14. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So that is exactly what I'm looking for. We are going to just do these with salt and pepper, at least for right now. In a lot of traditional Chinese cooking, they don't really use a lot of black pepper, but I still wanted to go the salt and pepper route. So the pepper that we're going to use for this is we're going to be using this ground white pepper. We're going to season it evenly like we usually do. Now we just have to be careful of not overdoing it with the ground pepper because it's going to be a little bit harder to see this time. Kind of looks like cracked sesame seeds or nutritional yeast, if you guys have seen that before. Apologize for the lighting. I know it's not the greatest today. So that's it, just salt and white pepper. All right, so our smoker is about 250. And we're gonna lay the sucker down in the hot spot right here. So you hear it sizzling a little bit, and in this case, I don't really mind because we're gonna be braising these ribs later. So I wanna get as much color and texture on here as we can. But later on, the second part of the cooking process should soften it up. But yeah, definitely wanna cook this one hotter. In terms of cooking time, because they're a lot smaller, maybe they'll be done in 2.5 hours or 3, but we'll check them later. All right, so it's been about 3 hours since we put these St. Louis ribs on. And again, because we are going to be braising these later, I don't need this to be fully done. So just to the touch, they're pretty soft, but they're not necessarily finished yet, I would say. What we're gonna do with this one is we're going to pull this one off, wrap it. We'll cool it first and then wrap it, and then we'll finish these off tomorrow. But that's about it, guys. All we did again was we just trimmed off the rib tips, salt, pepper, put them on for 3 hours, and I think that smoke is going to help us get some nice color, because especially with that red braised that we're trying to do, and I think it'll be super delicious. All right, so these are the ribs that we did on the smoker. We let them chill overnight, so we're just going to unwrap these and cut them into individual ribs for right now. All that we did with these was just to simply smoke them, just to get some color on there, and also to kind of cook them a little way through so we don't have to braise this entire rib. But as you guys see, we still got a pretty decent amount of smoke on there. And we're also going to be adding some aromatics to this dish. I'm going to crush 2 cloves of garlic. And we still got the paper left in the garlic and you're annoyed that it's not coming off there, and you're just going to crush it. Once you crush it, this paper will come right off. Then we'll add 2 to 3 decent sized knobs of ginger in there. You don't have to peel it because we're just going to let it braise in the liquid anyway. And 2 to 3 pieces of some green onion. And since this isn't going to be a garnish that we're putting on top, I'm not going to chop it super fine, braise in big chunks so we don't have to worry about a fine dice or julienne or anything like that. So we're going to start this braise with just a little bit of oil. And I'm going to take the ginger and garlic and I'm going to just put it into the oil just to start. And it's really not to get a toast on it. I don't want to take it that far, but I do want to get a little bit of that ginger and garlic flavor infused into the oil before we start adding in other things. All right, at this point, I'm going to start taking out this ginger and garlic. Again, it doesn't have that much color in it, which is fine, but I got all the flavor I feel like I could get out of it right now. I can start to smell the ginger and garlic coming off of the oil. Next step is we're gonna take some brown sugar. This dish is traditionally made with rock sugar, but I couldn't find it. So I saw it other places. A good substitution is brown sugar. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna toast this brown sugar in the oil and kind of make like a very, very light kind of caramel. One thing that we don't want to do is, I made this mistake, so this is actually batch number 2, is let it go too far because I ended up making some candy in my pot and it was not very good. So we want to make sure that this dissolves and it still stays fairly liquidy. And right now I don't have enough oil in the pan. Add just a little bit more oil and we're just gonna keep tossing this just until it starts to dissolve. Once it's dissolved, that's pretty much gonna be it for me. And this is on a very low heat as well, just because again, if you don't keep it moving, the heat is too high, then it for sure will just start to boil, and then you'll start to have like really burnt and also very hard sugar left in your pot. At this point, I think my sugar is dissolved fairly enough, and there's still some oil left in there because what we're going to do at this point is we're going to toss our ribs in this kind of oil and brown sugar mixture. And at this point, I would highly recommend using tongs to kind of like make sure you can coat all the sides of the ribs. All right, now at this point, we're gonna add the extra liquid to kind of make this a braise. We're gonna add in some Shaoxing cooking wine, some light soy sauce, dark soy sauce. Then we're gonna add some water to this. And we're gonna throw back our aromatics in, and then 2 pieces of star anise, and then about half a stick of cinnamon. So I'm gonna scrape the bottom of this pan real quick just to make sure there's not any leftover sugar or anything like that that's sticking before we cover this up. And we're gonna let this braise for probably about 45 minutes to an hour or so. We're gonna throw a lid on top of it, and then we're gonna put it back in the stove. All right, so this has been going for about 30 minutes. I'm gonna check on it. I'm gonna taste this sauce. Oh man, that's good. I didn't really know what to expect from this because it's my first time doing it. Again, this is just an idea that I had one late night, but hey, I think it's a pretty good idea. Not quite done yet. We'll probably let it go for another 10 to 15 minutes with the cover on, and then we're gonna take the top off to reduce the sauce for another 5-10 minutes. Okay, so it's been about another 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure these ribs are done, so I'm gonna pluck all these out. I'm gonna leave this uncovered and I'm gonna let this reduce a little bit because I was thinking about adding a little bit more salt to this because it felt like I needed it, but if we reduce it, It should concentrate the flavors a little bit more, and then possibly at the end maybe I'll add a little bit more brown sugar if I want it to be a little bit sweeter. We'll just have to wait to reduce it first. All right, so this has been reducing for about 2 to 3 minutes or so. I just tasted it. I think the salt level is fine. I just want to add a little bit more brown sugar to it just to sweeten up for my taste. Make sure you taste it for yourself before you start adding any seasonings. I'm gonna give this a quick stir to make sure all that sugar is dissolved. I'll let it reduce for another 2 to 3 minutes. Then we'll strain the sauce so we can pull out all the aromatics and all the bits right here, and then we'll kind of apply a last little saucing on those ribs before we plate them up. All right, so we got our ribs that we plucked out of that braise from earlier, and then we also have our liquid that we have strained. So with each rib, what I'm gonna do is just give that in that dunk in that sauce that we reduced, and it creates that really nice sheen on there. Traditionally, this dish is served in a clay pot. The one thing I love about braising things is this is where that cartilage is on that little edge right there, and it is gelatinous like. Now a lot of people don't like that, but to me that is a great looking rib right there. And that's it right there, guys. There's our smoked and red braised St. Louis pork ribs. Now this is one of those dishes that you got to eat with rice, so I got myself a little portion of rice. This is not white rice like you would traditionally get because my mom wants to make sure we're healthy, so we got some brown rice here. Let's give this a taste. Nice clean bite out of that bone right there. Honestly, I was a little bit worried about this dish because, conceptually I was worried about like if you smoke this pretty much all the way through. After a long braise, I was a little bit worried about it being grainy or mushy. Has great texture to it, and that smoke is coming through. If you guys haven't had this red braised pork before, usually it's pork belly. It's pretty sweet but very savory, which is why it's like one of those dishes that even though you're done with like the protein in it, like whether it's a pork belly or the ribs, like the sauce is still something that you can mix in with the rice and be really good. Yeah. I know most of the time a lot of people try to do different types of ribs. It really just has to do with the sauce that you put on the end. But I think the process of braising this also in like the liquid that would technically be the sauce packs a lot of flavor. I think cooking its own fat and melding its own flavors and things like that, especially with all the ginger, garlic, the star anise, and the cinnamon stick. It's really hard to get those kind of flavors unless you put them into like, you ground them up and put them in a sauce. But I think just kind of like slowly braising it in there makes a huge difference. This was a really fun cook to do just because it wasn't just barbecue because we use a smoker, but at the end of it, something that I wanted to come across as barbecue, it really is just another cooking technique, just the same way that you would call braising a cooking technique. And I feel like if we continue to use barbecue as a technique and keep it within that kind of realm, then you can kind of do whatever you want with it. Whether or not it makes it better or worse, I don't know, but that's part of the experimental part of cooking and being able to finding something that has a very specific kind of step-by-step process of how to make a certain dish, but introducing a new protein. And on top of that, adding another cooking technique before you get into like the real step-by-step dish itself. So that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed just kind of playing around with this dish. If you liked it, please like this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments for me or any other ideas that you guys want to see, leave them down in the comments below. But until the next video, I'll see you guys later.